Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and this morning I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Cambridge University Press. It's called The Law of Strangers, and it's actually a review of Jewish lawyers and international law in the 20th century, and I thought it was very interesting. Obviously I'm not a Jewish person, I'm a Gentile, but I'm looking at it very much dispassionately from the widest possible point of view, basically and mainly from the point of view of jurisprudence, which I will come on to in a minute. As I say, the book has been edited by two people, James Loeffler and Moria Paz. I hope I pronounced your name right, James. The title I've given the review, Elizabeth and I talked about it and I decided to do this review. I've called it a fascinating anthology on the law of strangers, recently published by Cambridge University Press. Let's look at the book first of all. It's only a small book. Hardback, there we go, there's the front cover there. Then there's the spine, and then you can see some inverse printing. It's difficult to read a lot of this, I have to say, but still they will do these things, and it does make it a bit difficult to read. But the total page number is just over 300 pages. There's a short, quite useful, I found, introduction in the back, based on people as much as things that have happened within the world. And in fact, if we get to the beginning of the index, you can see how it's structured there. And if we go from the back of the book to the front, there's some detail about the book itself, which I've lifted a little bit from, I have to say. But I do think it's useful because I didn't quite understand what they were referring to initially, which is why it got my attention. There's the front page. Then after that, there's some blurb, and then there's a dedication. I only review books that I think are important, useful for us. I'm not out to attack people. There's no point, because they put a lot of effort into these books. I've written books and I don't want to be heavily criticised. It's best to leave it unsaid. But I like this book, that's why I'm reviewing it. There is the contents section. I'm going to come on to Hans Kelsen in a few minutes. A total of 14 chapters in total, with an index at the back, then some acknowledgements, and you can see there's a list of the contributors put forward there, and then more contributors, and then you've got the introduction, a little bit of footnoting at the side, and you've got footnoting running all the way through the book, basically, to justify the points made. It's not excessively done, which is useful, because sometimes you can have half the page has got footnotes in. But we won't mention those books, will we? I could mention, but I'm not going to. It's mainly the practitioner works. The problem is that you've got to get the balance right. I think the balance is right here. So what do we say about the book? This. As the editors, James Loeffler and Moria Paz, write in The Law of Strangers, they say, from the Nuremberg Trials to contemporary human rights, Jews have long played a prominent role in the making of international law. Absolutely true. Now, this book from CUP examines Jewish lawyers and international law in the 20th century, as its subtitle suggests. And we'll come on to this because, however, the actual ties between Jewish heritage and legal thought remain a subject of mystery and conjecture, even among specialists, which is one of the motivations for this work. I found it interesting, specifically from an historical point of view. Now we'll get on to that in a minute, because the point is, it all grew, this is the quote, from a conversation, out of a conversation, between the editors of the book, that began at an Association of Jewish Studies conference panel in Boston many years ago. Now, I think that's interesting because that's where it germinated. Now, to a certain extent, the book is really a legal history book, as far as I was concerned. It was anyway. And the 14 contributors have been brought together to ponder what insights might emerge from exploring international legal history from the particular perspective of the Jewishness of some of its most prominent makers in the century, spanning the 1870s to the 1970s. And I'm quoting that, so it's not coming from anyone else but the editors themselves. So what we get as a result is a long-running inquiry from their original conversation, in other words, what kicked it all off. And that's what got my attention, because I could go through the individual people who are looked at in this work, but obviously I'm going to look at very specific people, because there is an introduction right at the beginning to explain how the book is structured, of course. Then the 14 chapters running to about 300 pages, split into 7 parts. Now, from the viewpoint of jurisprudence, we found that chapters 3 and 4 in part 2 of the book, covering Hans Kelsen, particularly illuminating, as many will have no idea of his immediate family or early childhood. I certainly didn't, and I have a very high regard for Kelsen within the concepts of jurisprudence itself and the basic studies I did all those years ago. Now, his original name, of course, was Cohn or Cohen. No idea about that. I didn't even think about it. He's Hans Kelsen, and that's the end of it. Now, as with the rest of the book, there is breathtaking research and attention to detail throughout with substantial footnoting of use to researchers. And a point I would make about Kelsen is that if you're doing jurisprudence at the moment, difficult subject to teach, as I know, but if you're actually having to study it, many people hate it. But this book will give you a different insight, perhaps. It may give you that first that you're looking for. So bear it in mind. I wouldn't say that about the Cambridge University people myself, but however, it's much wider than that, because it is you are looking very much at core jurisprudence here. Now, as the editors make comments on, this collection of biographical studies takes a unique interdisciplinary approach, pairing historians and legal scholars to explore how their Jewish identities and experiences have shaped their legal thoughts and activism. I think that's very important, because, as I said, I think you start this book on the basis that it's a law book, but it's actually about history. They have also used newly discovered sources and sophisticated interpretative methods to give an alternative history of 20th century international legal profession, of the international legal profession, and, quote, a new model to the emerging field of international legal biography, which will have relevance to a wide-ranging readership. Now, I quite agree with what they say there, because we're looking at very specific people, some of whom I have to say, I've never heard of, but which is one of the reasons why the book is worth reading. Let me conclude then by saying we thought this was an intriguing book, which gives us a concise statement in the following areas, and this is taken from what the publishers say. The presentation of engaging biographical case studies that expand knowledge of key historical figures while contributing to the larger questions over the Jews and law. It engages legal specialists, historians and other scholars interested in the questions of religion, ethnicity, politics and international law. And finally, it illuminates the state of the field and the emerging new directions in legal history, international law and society studies. So therefore, the bottom line on it is that we're getting quite an interesting commentary and a benefit from what the researchers have produced. And I think that is when I take Kelsen as an example, that is actually a reason why the book is well worth reading. And as I say, it may give you a new insight depending on where your studies take you. The hardback edition of the book was first published on the 26th of September 2019. Let's just have one last look at it. I'll open it in the middle. This is about René Cassin, A Most Inglorious Right. There we go. That's the start of the subject matter here. René Cassin, Freedom of Movement, Jews and Palestinians, written by Moria Paz. So there's an introduction. You've got the actual footnoting there, and so forth, and you run all the way through. You can see how the book goes. And I'm going to say one last comment, and that is that you read this book with an open mind. It doesn't matter what your views are, one way or the other, about anything. I think and this is what I've always said in jurisprudence, you don't come into my classroom with preconceived notions and want to come in wanting to take offence. You come in to listen and find out what this is about. That's why I thought the book was so useful, because the balance is there. Thank you very much to James and Mariah and to everybody else who's been involved. First class book, And thank you also to Cambridge University Press for continuing to publish these excellent pieces of research which assist us greatly. Thank you. Bye-bye.